Fellas, today we're going to be reacting to my viewers' MMA hot takes. Now, the other day on my community channel, on my YouTube channel, I basically posted a question. Well, I put a question saying, post your MMA hot takes, and we're going to be going over a few of these today. I'm not going to be able to get through every single one of them, so if you want me to do another video like this, or you like the concept, then of course I'll do it. But listen, I want to hear your hot takes, so we're going to go in there with the first, I guess, hot take, which is Wonderboy still, and by the way, I haven't read these before. I know I've put them into, I know I've kind of edited them, but I haven't actually thought them through yet. So this is going to be my first kind of thought process at these. Wonderboy still has a possible chance of winning the belt. Not saying realistic, but possible. It really just depends on how he does against Shavkat Rakhmonov for me. Because if he beats Shavkat, I'm certain that they're going to give him a title shot. I mean, why wouldn't you? If Wonderboy goes out there and beats Shavkat Rakhmonov, and he's just finished Kevin Holland as well, so if he goes out there and beats Shavkat, who's probably one of the most scariest contenders in the welterweight division, it's going to be hard to say that he doesn't deserve a title shot. Obviously, people like Belal Muhammad earned one before him, but Wonderboy still needs a title shot, man, if he beats Shavkat. And if he goes up against Leon Edwards, if Leon Edwards is still champion theoretically, if Wonderboy were to beat Shavkat and Leon Edwards is still champion, call me delusional, I'd probably favour Wonderboy in that fight. I mean, he's one of the best, if not the best strikers in the UFC right now. If he goes out there and beats Shavkat, and the way that he also beat Kevin Holland, I'd actually probably favour him to beat Leon Edwards, and it also depends on how Leon Edwards does against Colby Covington. But do I really think that's going to happen, and do I think he's going to beat Shavkat? No. Shavkat's one of the most scary fighters in the division. It's also going to be Shavkat's biggest test in the division, but from what I've seen, I mean, Shavkat's finished every single opponent he's ever fought. Wonderboy, amazing striker, but we've seen that like Shavkat stylistically won't be the best matchup for him. And Wonderboy was trained to fight Michel Pereira. I don't know. Listen, I'm not trying to pronounce Michel Pereira's name, man. Pereira, whatever you want to say. I'm not doing these Chael Sonnen pronunciations. But either way, he was training to fight him, and obviously that fight got cancelled. And now he's going to face Shavkat Rakhmonov. Fair play to Wonderboy, but it's a really tough fight. But I do have Shavkat winning that fight. Do I think Wonderboy will be champion? No. Do I think he'll be champion, or could have a really, really good chance of becoming champion if he beats Shavkat Rakhmonov? Yes. So that's my thoughts on Wonderboy. I think he's very old now, isn't he? Like 39 years old, 40 years old. But I mean, look at what he did against Kevin Holland. So I don't know. We're gonna have to see. But I do have Wonderboy losing to Shavkat, but if he manages to beat Shavkat in any way, then I'm sure the UFC are going to give him a title shot. Because imagine Leon Edwards versus Wonderboy for a pay-per-view main event for the welterweight belt. That would be huge. And I'm going to be honest, of course, if Belal Muhammad, if he gets the next title shot, fair enough. But the UFC, 10 out of 10 times, would rather have Wonderboy fighting for the belt than Belal Muhammad, even though Belal Muhammad has, done what he's done in the welterweight division. But either way, that's the first hot take. I think he's got a chance, but I'm not saying it's going to be. I don't think he gets past Shavkat. The next one. I like watching fight nights in the Apex more than big crowds in pay-per-view. I like to be able to hear the punches, kicks, and the corners of the fighters, and the crowd can get in the way of that sometimes. I agree and I disagree. You say that you like fight nights in the Apex more than big crowds in a pay-per-view, but I'm going to be honest. Are you saying you'd rather watch, Bobby Green versus Grant Dawson in a fight night in the Apex over a Charles Oliveira crowd atmosphere? And obviously I'm not trying to take the fight itself into consideration, but the atmosphere, like UFC Paris, UFC London, even when like Charles Oliveira is fighting, you can't beat the atmosphere of the crowd. And I understand what you're saying. I kind of like when fight nights take place in the Apex, but at the same time, I don't know, I like them both. I do understand what you're coming from, but I'd always pick a crowd in a certain place. Like I'd always pick a London crowd or a Paris crowd, or even like a Charles Oliveira fighting crowd, or even in Abu Dhabi or in Australia. I'd always pick that over the Apex. But if it's just a fight night, a bog standard fight night, I kind of like I kind of like being able to hear the punches and the kicks and all the the corners of the fighters. I think it adds a nice little thing to the fight. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say this, but I think it'll add to the fight. But yeah, I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, I do like the atmosphere of like UFC London and Australia, and you know what I'm saying. So yeah, that's my opinion on that take. I don't mind the Apex. I kind of like it, but I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't say I prefer it over the other pay-per-view fight or pay-per-view atmospheres. Next one. Tom Aspinall is a future greatest heavyweight. Now, if you've been watching this channel, you'll know that I actually like Tom Aspinall a lot. He's probably one of my favourite fighters right now. But we need to see him face a real contender. The best opponent he's faced is either Alexander Volkov or Sergey Spivak. He did finish them both in the first round, but we need to see him face somebody like Sergey Pavlovich, Cyril Gane, Jailton Almeida. We need to see him face like a proper contender before we can just say he's going to be the future greatest heavyweight. If he gets past someone like Almeida, Gane or Pavlovich with ease, then I'll probably say, yeah, Aspinall's got the potential to become the greatest heavyweight. I mean, he's 30 years old, which is relatively young in the heavyweight division. He's quick, he's powerful, he's well-rounded, he's got everything he needs to become. I truly believe he'll be champion, but to become the greatest heavyweight, it's not easy though, because you got to realise this is the heavyweight division. One shot can change everything, and I guess that's the same for every division, but the risk is increased in the heavyweight division. But I'd say the current greatest is heavyweight, so if Tom Aspinall's consistent for the next 5 years and he's, winning fights, doesn't take too many losses, I think he'll have the potential to overtake Stipe and become the greatest heavyweight, but he'll have to go on a bit of a run, and by that I don't mean, a jog. I mean like he'll have to go on a heavyweight run. He'll have to go on a heavyweight run, and he'll have to succeed against some of these contenders, but yeah, he's got the potential to do it, so I kind of agree with that take. Next take. Anderson Silva's super overrated. I feel like I agree and I kind of disagree. I don't think he's the greatest of all time. A lot of people still think Anderson Silva's the greatest of all time. I have to disagree with that. I mean, he can't be the greatest of all time with the amount of losses he's had. Like, the term greatest of all time, you have to be the greatest actually of all time. You can't just be the greatest in your prime and then go on a massive losing streak towards the end. I mean, we look at John Jones. He beat the previous era of light heavyweights, his era of light heavyweights, and then he beat the current era of heavyweights. Whereas Anderson Silva, he was never really able to beat the next generation of middleweights, if you know what I mean. So I don't think he's the greatest of all time. And like I said, he's lost 11 times. Most of them were towards the end of his career. But with that being said, you take away the end of his career, he was an absolute beast. He was way ahead of his time. The way that he was starching people, I mean, just look at that Forrest Griffin fight. Anderson Silva in his prime was a beast. One of the best strikers in the UFC. He went on an insane middleweight tear. Still the greatest middleweight of all time. He's got records that he's set in the UFC. In his prime, he was one of the greatest of all time. So I don't really want to call him overrated. And he's definitely still in the top 5 greatest of all time. But if we're talking resume-wise, then yeah, suffering 11 losses or 9 losses towards the end of your career is not the greatest. It's not a great look. But listen, I can respect Anderson Silva, but you've also got to consider as well, he did take steroids, so that's another thing to knock him off. So I don't think he's necessarily overrated. I don't hear like too much people. I hear a few people, but I don't think it's a common opinion to say that Anderson Silva is the greatest, but he's definitely one of the greatest because in his prime he was insane. But that's the first take. Next take. Islam Makhachev has already surpassed Khabib in terms of his resume. I disagree. If we're talking in terms of resume, he's beaten Alexander Volkanovski and Charles Oliveira, which at the time were 2 very respectable wins. I mean, Alexander Volkanovski was the pound-for-pound best at the time that he beat him, and he hadn't lost in so long. And Charles Oliveira was the greatest lightweight well, maybe not the greatest, but the best lightweight at the time. He was going on a massive streak of finishes. So at the time, Islam Makhachev got 2 respectable wins, but Khabib, if we're talking in terms of resume, Khabib's 29-0. I know he did beat Gaethje, he beat Poirier, he beat Rafael dos Anjos, he beat McGregor, and the way that he did it as well was so dominant. And don't get me wrong, Islam beat Oliveira pretty dominantly. The Volkanovski one maybe wasn't as dominant because it was a very close fight, but then again, I'm not sure Khabib would necessarily finish Volkanovski. I think if Islam wants to surpass Khabib, I think right now Khabib's still ahead of him on terms of resume. If Islam beats Oliveira in the rematch, I think then they're on the same level. And then if he goes out there and beats Gaethje, I mean, Khabib's also beating Gaethje, so it kind of depends how Islam does against Gaethje. But if Islam beats Gaethje anywhere like similar how Khabib did, then I'll be happy to say that Islam Makhachev, resume-wise, is above Khabib. But yeah, to be fair, Islam Makhachev, I mean, he only won the belt a year ago. And he's already got an insane resume with Volkanovski and Oliveira. So I think he's not far from overtaking Khabib, but I think he's got a little bit left. I mean, one title defense. He's only got one defense so far, which is Volkanovski. So for me, just 2 wins away from surpassing Khabib. Next take. Demetrius Johnson beats Bradley Martin in a street fight, Thai boxing, BJJ wrestling and karate. I agree with all of those, but not wrestling. You've got to realise he's 260 though. Like, Bradley Martin is 260. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, of course, when submissions are allowed, Demetrius Johnson's going to get him. Thai boxing, karate, unless Bradley Martin somehow catches him, which is very unlikely. Demetrius Johnson just pieces him up and leg kicks him to death, basically. But when it's pure wrestling, and I feel like Bradley Martin takes it. Like I said, he is 260, and there's weight classes for a reason. Even if Demetrius Johnson has wrestled a lot more than him and has a lot more knowledge, when an absolute tank like Bradley Martin's coming at you to wrestle, I'm not sure what Demetrius Johnson's going to do. But at the same time, maybe Bradley Martin gasses out because, listen, I don't think he's ever gone on a run in his life. So maybe Bradley Martin gasses out. But when it comes to a pure wrestling match, a pure grappling match without any submissions, I think Bradley Martin would take him. Again, depends on how long the match is because he probably gasses out. But yeah, he is 260 though, if you haven't, if you don't know that already. In the final take, Leon has potential to be a better fighter of all time than Usman, or even the greatest of all time of welterweight. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. I think he's got, I don't know, man, because Leon's going to have to go on a run. You've got to realise, people do underrate Leon. Like, he's only lost, I believe, twice in the UFC. One loss was to Kamaru Usman, who he beat in the future, which is similar to GSP in the sense that GSP's beating the people he lost to. And then another one of Leon's losses, I believe, was his debut against some random guy. Apart from that, Leon's kind of been beating everyone in the welterweight division. I mean, he's beaten Vicente Luque, he's got obviously beaten Kamaru Usman, and he's going to be, if he defends against Colby Covington and goes on a bit of a run himself, I think he's got what it takes to surpass Usman. I think if he can get past Colby and maybe beat a couple more contenders like Shavkat, maybe Bilal Muhammad, if he can go on a little bit of a run and beat those contenders, I think he has the potential to surpass Usman. But to become the greatest of all time in the welterweight division and surpass GSP, welterweight-wise, he's going to have to go on a massive streak of wins. Yeah, he's going to have to get so many title defenses. He's literally going to have to be champion this time in the next couple of years. Obviously, obviously this is the greatest of all time of welterweight, so it doesn't necessarily mean he has to go up to a different weight class, but to be the greatest welterweight of all time, he's going to have to go on a streak. Do I think he's going to do it? No, but he could do it, but I don't know. Everyone has potential to do something. I need to see more from Leon, though. The only notable win that he's got in his career right now, recently, is Kamaru Usman. We need to see him face more contenders before we start calling him the welterweight GOAT. So, yeah, that's my take on that. But that's all the hot takes so far. Please let me know if you want me to do another video like this, a similar video like this. Maybe I go through some more. And yeah, let me know if you agree, and thanks for watching.